Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's BAInsights. I'm really pleased to be joined by three excellent guests to talk about Scaled Agile and business analysis. Before we get into that, we're going to have some introductions. But before the introductions, just want to ask if anyone hasn't subscribed, please do. And if you've got any views and comments of your own related to Scaled Agile, please feel free to share them in the comments as well. But as promised, let's do some introductions. And Jill, I wonder if we can start with you first, please.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Gill Dunn. I've been in business analysis for 14 years and managed a team for the last 10. And we've recently changed our ways of working to Scaled Agile. So this is really interesting for me. I manage lead business analysts and Scrum product owners who coordinate the business analysis in the teams. So that's me.
Brilliant. We timed it perfectly to have you on.
My name is Stoyan Chaldakov. I'm business and data analyst in the World Bank Group, and I've been in the business analysis for about 10 years now. And actually, currently, we are in a transformation stage where we will adapt SAFe as a framework, as a Scaled Agile framework. So actually, this session came just on time. Because it will be really interesting for me to hear and more opinions about what is that Scale Agile and how we can survive it during our day-to-day activities. So Brilliant. Thank you, John, for the invitation and being here.
Not at all, you're welcome.
Colleagues.
And Faizal.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm Faizal Dawood. I'm a lead business analyst consultant at Hippo. And Hippo are sort of a full service digital consultancy, working with clients both in the public and private sector. And a large part of what Hippo, the next phase of sort of Hippo is sort of taking on larger projects and larger programs of work, which obviously have a scaled agile theme to them. So I've also seemed to have timed it perfectly whilst joining this call. So looking forward to getting stuck in.
Excellent, brilliant. Well, we'll make a start in on the first question. So we should probably start with the most fundamental in terms of what is Scaled Agile, and what does it look like from a business analysis perspective, compared perhaps to a single regular Agile team. And Jill, if we could start with you first, please.
Yeah, sure. So again, as in my introduction, this is all quite new to me, but understanding how Scaled Agile works, it's about the different phases and understanding what you need to get out of a problem statement and the understanding of a piece of work before it progresses to the next stage. So we've got 10 Scrum teams which are delivering, and each of those have a Scrum product owner. Now that role is a blended role of a business analyst and product owner. So our low-level business analysis takes place in the delivery, but actually there's an awful lot of business analysis which takes place before that. To enable the teams to have that flow of delivery, we need to have understood some of the larger higher level impacts, and we need to understand that we've prioritized the right work through the system. So at a portfolio level, we have lead business analysis looking at the breadth and the impact of the larger scale problem statements, helping to shape what the possible features might be, so that by the time a team gets it, we're pretty confident we're working on the right thing, but also that role within the team who is doing the business analysis as well as the product ownership, they're in a really good place to be able to take the work through to production. So what is it? It's a series of events, from a funnel. That's the way I think about Scaled Agile, is that sort of processing through a funnel down to team level, and the series of events, and the planning activities and the sort of coordination of that stage development along the way.
Excellent, thank you, Jill. And I guess that funnel contains the program level type view, the project type view, and then lower into features of detail.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the way that those roles and the different accountable areas to have the necessary input to get to the right output that gets through the funnel, that's the coordination that's potentially different in Scaled Agile than you would have elsewhere, but it's more structured. So making sure you're coordinating those roles to have that progression is what gives you that sort of transparency and understanding who does what and what decisions are made by different people.
I see. Thank you. Thank you very much. Stoyan, what's your view on that same question around what is Scaled Agile?
Actually, I have a very, very simple one-sentence explanation about what Scaled Agile is. And the reason for that is, first of all, okay, I will talk mostly about SAFe, but yeah, it's more or less Scaled Agile. It's almost 20 years now since the first drafts of this Scaled Agile thing started to exist. For this 20 days, the most simple explanation for Scaled Agile for me that I've read so far is take the Agile principles and apply them across many teams to deliver large, complex solution products. This is really one. Take the same, actually, they're the same principles, just adapt them somehow in order to work for a lot of teams and for more complex solutions. In terms of the business analysis role, specifically here, what I've seen so far, the business analysis role, if it exists in that name, because it's not often that business analyst as a role exists. It may have different names. Even product owners, in some scenario, they do mostly of this job. But how I see it here, the business analyst here is more about orchestrating values across different backlogs. Different teams, different backlogs. It is more or less related to do to manage the dependencies across a lot of teams. When you have one team, one backlog, it's dependencies, yes, they still exist, but they're not that many as if you have, for example, 10 Scrum teams who work together and have to solve one big issue or to build something really big and complex. And the third thing is about alignment of the stakeholders. Again, one team, not that many stakeholders, but in Scaled Agile, you can have plenty, meaning 10, 20, 50 even. It depends how big is the organization. So more or less, if I have to conclude, the business analyst role here is more or less aligning the stakeholders, managing dependencies, and orchestrating the different backlogs, meaning orchestrating the value across these backlogs. And if you allow me to use just one metaphor about that, if in one team, one agile team, it's like building a house. You are more or less focused on the floor plan, furniture, rooms, things like that. But if you are business analyst in a scaled agile environment, you are building a city, and you have to ensure that roads, buildings are on the right place, facilities, the big picture. So you're more focused on that rather than the small piece thing. And this is my opinion.
I think that's quite a good analogy, actually, Stoyan, on that one, because it's I think as a BA, you get quite focused on your own. If you're working on a product, you get very focused just on your own product delivery. Whereas, depending on where you're working in a Scout project as a BA, you might get that broader sense. You might have to connect a number of themes that teams are working on as well. So I think it's really, really good example. Faizal.
Yeah, I think I agree with what the others have said. I think in sort of my experience, Scaled Agile is sort of effectively sort of a multi-team environment, delivering sort of many sort of interrelated products, which could be sort of under a single domain or function or department, however sort of the client is shaped up. And it's about having to do the basics of what a BA does, but doing them in a much broader context. So you'll still be analyzing requirements, understanding as is and to be processing, managing stakeholders, taking that holistic view, but you're doing it where you in an environment where you have so many more moving parts and so many more sort of related things and considerations and dependencies that you will sort of have to manage that affect many different teams that you work within. So I think it's working in that sort of multi-team environment getting your basics right, but doing it in an environment where you might have many stakeholders and many processes and many holistic views that you might need to focus on.
Makes me think when a few of you described, those type of BAs that have been fortunate enough to be working very closely with the business, perhaps explored what it is the business needs and started thinking about some of the functional architecture and recognizing with the architects the need for multiple components to deliver the solution. And if those teams are then structured in a scaled agile way, feels like quite a nice example where that BA would have broad sense of understanding the context in which everyone's working, but be pretty well placed in terms of understanding some relevant stakeholders so they can sort of connect the dots and so they can go and figure out some of the answers that the various teams need of them, whether they're working on the front end, if they're working in data, interfaces, or other aspects of the products that have been delivered. I mean, I think beyond what you've said, there's not a great deal I could probably add to inform anybody what Scaled Agile is, but I think it's important to recognise that you're also supporting that continuous alignment between that delivery and what is the strategic imperatives, be it of the program or the organisation as well. So having that BA mindset when it comes to traceability is still as applicable in a Scaled Agile environment. In fact, more applicable probably than it is outside of Scaled. I wonder, Stoyan, how do you see the role fitting in within the BA role? That is fitting within frameworks such as SAFe. I guess in respect to whether individual BAs are working at the team level, or program level, or portfolio level, as Gill was talking about.
Specifically for the BA role, I have at least there is one Bulgarian saying, which in English it sounds like this: carved stone. Carved stone is something that wherever you put it, it fits. Actually, this is the BI. So it doesn't matter if the BI is more or less engaged on a team level, on a art or program level, or on a portfolio level. The BI role, I think, perfectly fits in any of these. Why? Because, for example, on the team level, the business analyst can help to refine like the features into stories. On art level, it can help to manage again dependencies, mostly again these dependencies, but it's something which we'll hear often when we talk about Scaled Agile. And on a portfolio level, business analysts can help mostly to identify the business outcomes and to identify any OKR/KPIs which can be used to measure that business outcome. So in any of these team, art/program, portfolio level, the BA has its role and can fit everywhere. It depends again. At least from my perspective, I never seen a business analyst who works on all of the levels. I don't know if it's possible in this scaled manner, but if it is possible, you have to be like have to master the business analysis because it's very comprehensive thing. But I think, honestly, I don't think it's possible, but it can fit the BI role in any of these levels.
Yeah, I know you mean about thinking about the possibility of if you're a single BA, that seems quite daunting considering the multiple levels you'd have to consider, the different stakeholders, the different teams that would all need your time.
Exactly.
Unless you were able to stay awake for 24 hours, 60 days a year, I think it's probably unlikely. Before any BAs out there volunteer, obviously. Faizal, what's your view on that?
I think from my point of view, in my experience, I've worked with BAs across the various levels, and I think the key is for the BAs working at sort of the lower level, although I don't like saying the lower level, but the lower level team level where they sort of work with the development team to refine stories and identify edge cases and get sort of a product out, and then you've got the BAs working at sort of more of a program level where they're sort of identifying cross-team impacts and dependencies, and then sort of at the higher portfolio level where they're working with perhaps sort of senior stakeholders, directors, to sort of align epics and strategic themes. I think you do need analysis at all of those levels, whether it's one person, it probably not, but a group of analysts sharing knowledge and effectively making sure that there's sort of a robust analysis thread from the high level strategic initiatives and drivers right down to the lower level sort of button clicking on a page that a user might see. I think given the nature of the sort of the BA role and how sort of T-shaped we are, I think it's important just to flex where appropriate and add value where it's the best opportunity to add value, sort of in a particular sort of program or multi-team space.
And that point around flexing, Faizal, just definitely resonates, because you definitely need that adaptive mindset that you have that most BAs have, to not be too daunted about being thrown into different situations, being moved across different products on different days, and interacting with different stakeholders who probably have different styles and different needs as well.
Definitely.
Gill, what's your perspective? If the two gents have left anything further to talk about on that question?
Yeah, so I mean, in my world, my lead BAs are mainly at portfolio level, but we're trying to explore that enterprise level. So having that connection, understanding where the work is coming from, to almost fast track some of that analysis at portfolio level by really understanding the OKRs they're contributing to, and the sort of the key themes and objectives that we've identified. So I think that potentially is sort of one person stretching across those two stages. But then, yeah, the lower level detail, the analysis in terms of getting the right work in front of the engineers to be able to sort of get that each story out into production, and knowing it's the right thing and the right acceptance criteria is definitely a team job. Now, which is interesting. So talking about flexing, we have the analysis as part of an embedded team. So we don't move them between contexts, but interestingly, what we do is move the work to the teams. So the whole team might suddenly pick up a completely new feature. So that adaptability and flex is absolutely there, but it's for the whole team. So so we try and everyone has to learn the new context and the new stakeholders all in one go. But we're quite early days, but that is proving quite interesting. But from a BA role, it's potentially more fulfilling than having a specific small part of a customer journey to work on day in, day out forevermore. Is actually having the interest in understanding different areas of the business, so that the work might change, but the team stays the same.
Yeah, I quite like that future. It seems like it, as you say, it might be a bit more interesting for a BA to get exposed to different parts of the business as you work on, I guess, potentially similar products, but for different groups, or at least products with similar capabilities, I suppose, from a BA standpoint.
Yeah.
I feel like from the three answers that you've given as well, in terms of, it's quite clear really as to how the BA, what the BA's role is at all levels. To some extent, we've covered the strategic side, where they're translating the strategy into thinking about deliverable value. They're maintaining that transparency, working with the different teams to ensure there's valid outcomes, and just enabling really that cross-team coordination and integration really that's necessary. So I feel like we've probably talked about the role contextually probably enough. So maybe we'll go on and talk about some BA techniques that you find as most valuable at scale. Faizal, I ask you that question first, please.
Yeah, sure. I think in my experience, I think the classic thing that sort of comes to mind is sort of value stream mapping, and understanding sort of at a high level what is the sort of the core need or the core driver that you're trying to sort of fulfill, and sort of connecting that to the various levels of value. I think at scale, making sure requirements are tracked and traced is hard enough. It's hard enough doing that in a sort of a singular team, but in a sort of a multi-team environment, that can be more tricky. And without sort of good processes in place or strong BAs or product owners, a delivery team might fall into the trap of focusing on just delivering a specific thing because we can say that our team delivered a thing, rather than focusing on, as a business, what's the most valuable thing to sort of deliver. And sort of a related point on that is sort of requirements traceability, and just linking that to what the sort of key business drivers are, which stakeholders and which stakeholder groups identified those requirements, what user needs, where have they sort of originated from. And again, doing that in a sort of a multi-team environment can add more complexity if you don't have sort of more robust processes in place. And one of the key things for me, and it's very sort of simplistic template, but the Pop-it template I find is really handy. It just gives you something really simple to come back to, and making sure that you're taking sort of a holistic view in sort of a problem scenario, where you might, in a sort of a scaled agile environment, you might need to focus on multiple holistic areas if you're focusing in on your core requirements within your context, but just pushing that up a level and just understanding what 3 or 4 or 5 or more BAs and other delivery teams are working on. So I think it's making sure you have that sort of helicopter view by using something like Pop-it to enable you to do that.
That's interesting, Faizal. Actually, yeah, talking about those broader techniques rather than perhaps some of the lower level ones that we might be used to, which I'm still trying to apply when we get into the feature analysis. But at broader level, it's interesting to hear your view. Gill, what would be your view on it?
So at the portfolio level, I think what's really key is understanding the problem statement of the piece of work that's been presented. Often we'll have change requests which are like a solution. I need a new thing, or I need this process to do this. But what I think is really, really valuable activity that the business analysis can achieve is really understanding, are we solving the right problem, and challenging what the symptoms are of that. And obviously there's a number of problem solving methods of choice, but I think that, well, problem root cause analysis, and I think that really helps start you off from the right place, before you start getting into solution mode and you start progressing the work towards the teams, is really validating. We know that by solving this problem, it's going to contribute to this OKR, and this is why, like, that we really understand the metrics of it. So I think that's a really fundamental part from the portfolio level. And I think at team level, there's our teams have evolved agile practices over many years, and they've got some really great techniques in terms of working with the engineers to simplify and to streamline their processes. I'm a huge fan of behavior-driven development using BDD formats. It kind of works with everybody, and it's just a really good way for our acceptance criteria to be really meaningful yet really simple. And that's probably one of the nicest ways to help give refinement a boost, just bringing it to life. And the role of the BA or PO in the team to express why we're doing something in whatever format to help bring that sort of golden thread through from your organizational OKR through to this one user story, and express that why, what the outcomes are intended to achieve.
Thanks for that. I was on a project many years ago, and it's all about the red thread of trying to connect everything. You use the golden thread, Gill. So I like that term. It makes it sound a little bit more polished.
It does sound really polished, doesn't it? Golden thread.
Stoyan?
Yeah, about techniques.
Yeah.
Okay, so from my perspective, these techniques which are most valuable at scale are those that bring some more transparency, some more alignment, and some more decision making. Saying that, what I mean, one of, okay, not favorite, but the must-have technique here is the stakeholder mapping, and I think it's crucial. Again, at the scale, you have so many of them, and it's very useful to understand at least the decision-making power of every stakeholder. Why? Because in the next technique, which is prioritization frameworks, for example, Moscow, let's say in the different teams, different backlogs, you have a couple of features or big bets / epics that are must-have. So then, based on the stakeholder mapping, you can understand the decision-making power. But then here's the prioritization. Based on this, you can decide, okay, you do not have the decision power, but using this technique, you can help the stakeholder to understand more which is actually important and to decide which to develop first. And then is the impact mapping, meaning every feature has its business outcome. So the focus there is to understand, in every team even, to understand why they are building something, not only what they are building and delivering. So saying that these three techniques like impact mapping, like prioritizations frameworks, and stakeholder mapping. At the scale, I think this helps a lot. Of course, all of these different techniques are very useful, again, not on a low-key level, but they're working specifically they're working and within the small team. But when you look at the scale, again, stakeholder, prioritization, and impact mapping, because when you have a lot of people with different decision power, it's very, very difficult to prioritize. So it's good to have this impact mapping. And when you have a couple of features with the same, let's say they are must-have, okay, let's see what's based on the impact mapping, what will be the potential impact to the end customers, let's say, based on this. So yeah, these three techniques for me are the most valuable one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's always interesting to hear different people's perspectives, because obviously taking the three of your perspectives, you've covered loads of different angles and techniques that could provide benefits to the BA and therefore the delivery in different ways. Makes me think as well, I mean, bringing those things together and being able to visualize the component parts, the findings, the analysis, the root causes, and try and paint that picture and to do some storytelling, I think is going to be a particularly powerful set of BA techniques in this case that will bring all those things together as we communicate with different levels of individual as well. It takes me back as well to probably one very specific technique. You know, I think I mentioned sort of like functional design, functional architecture a little while ago. I think the value in a scaled delivery of understanding the picture of what you're delivering from a functional perspective is really, really beneficial, because quite often the business, you know, they need that assurance that we're building the right products. Going back to Gill's point, we're building the right products as part of a big solution that is ultimately going to fulfill their needs. And if they can think about their needs and trace it back to those functional capabilities, that can sometimes be, or most of the time, be a very useful way of looking at it. So I think between us, I think we've probably covered all the techniques that are notable, certainly enough for people to go away and practice anyway. So as we move away from perhaps thinking about techniques, I wonder if we can think about challenges. And Gill, I mean, are there any particular challenges that you've faced relating to business analysis in a scaled agile environment? And I guess importantly, how have you overcome those issues?
So, you know, we're quite early days in terms of our adoption of scaled agile, but I do think our biggest challenge has been around the stages and how the work transitions through those stages. So having a group of people working on an epic at portfolio level, doing just enough shaping to understand that it's worth progressing into a team, helping support the breakdown into right-sized chunks. So we've got some some prediction around how long it's going to take. So a decent sized chunk of work, a feature. But then that's the like wrapped up and packaged and then dropped into a team. Now that transition period, because of the framework effectively saying, you know, each feature could go to any team, depends who's available, you know, that sort of pull-based system where you can, so that the next one with room will pull the next feature in. That doesn't allow for a very long or supported transition period for that information that you've gathered at portfolio level to work its way into the team. So we've got the person doing the analysis and the low-level requirements in the delivery team picking up the feature, and it's new information to them. They also need to go back to see what the analysis has taken place at portfolio level, but then they need to continue that analysis to be able to get the low-level detail ready for the engineers. It's a really fine balance, because you can't have the portfolio analysis going to such a low level that there's then nothing left for the team to have any autonomy over, but you can't do it at such high level that they've got so much shaping work to do then that they can't actually get started with cutting code for months until the analysis and the requirements are done. So that's been a learning curve. So we've started with one approach. We've got and different capabilities the individuals involved as well is another factor. So finding the balance for the teams, the capabilities, and how to, in what's potentially a very short handover period, build in a common level of expectation around what is good enough to move into a team, but then also what is the expectation of that first few weeks, months when a feature lands within a team, as to allow that low-level analysis to take place, to make sure that what we do refine to that low-level story is within the gift of the team to do, and not fully pre-written at portfolio level. So that's been quite a challenge. We've done a retrospective after each quarterly planning to kind of understand how did that transition go, what sort of information went well. So our Scrum product owners in the teams doing the low-level requirements have had regular feedback with the lead business analysts who've done the portfolio level. We're encouraging that really free-flowing feedback to help identify what worked, what didn't work so well, what good looks like, sharing it. I operate a community of practice, so we keep this a regular conversation of this work's coming down the line, don't know who's going to get it, but this is the types of things that we're looking at, just so that we can take away the element of surprise where we can, but also start to talk about what good enough looks like and how we can then support within the teams to help drive that lower level information out. So yeah, I'd say that's our primary challenge, just from a flow of work perspective. There are other challenges around organizational ways of working to support Scaled Agile, and how you need people much bigger than change thinking in the right way to support it. But that's a broader influence circle. That's a much bigger problem. I'll stick with my team and my retrospectives for what I can solve. It's within my control right now. But there are challenges around, mindset organizationally around supporting agility, supporting free-flowing work and things like that, prioritizing the right things.
Yeah, that definitely resonated. As the larger point you was making about the balance of the analysis, and I think people will be reassured that watching this, that maybe are new to SAFE, that there isn't a predefined rule for the perfect balance. It's something that evolves based on the time, the delivery, and the experience and makeup of the team and the organisation as well. They're all factors that are not easy to control. So as long as you keep the team together and you encourage and allow the team to learn, then you would start to see benefits fairly quickly and incrementally, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jill. Stoyan, what was the biggest challenge you've faced?
Okay, let's say it that way. One of the biggest challenge here is actually adopting the scaled agile frameworks, let's say SAFe. Why? Because, at least from my perspective, it is full of terminology, a lot. And people, developers, QAs, analysts who used to work in mostly on a small team, they have this like small team culture. They do not have that so many terms. Here, what you have this agile release streams, development value streams, operational value streams, so many value streams, a lot of things. First, all of the people have to learn this terminology in order to understand what's happening in that framework and to fit that framework to fit best to them. Then it is like a top-down approach. And that's why actually this Scaled Agile, from my perspective, it's a little bit tricky Agile thing. Why? Because, Agile, it was built for small teams. It's to provide flexibility, easy decision making. But when you talk about scale, it's very, very, very difficult. And if this is the one of the challenges, how to adopt it and how to change a little bit the mindset of the people who used to work on a small agile environment, let's say that way, to adapt scaled agile frameworks. The other thing is that usually these teams, they are building features that are interdependent. So what you can do if your team is stuck, have like a hard stop because it has dependency from another team. There is no that flexibility. You have to wait, you have to communicate, you have to have meetings, and there is a lot of depth about this. And from my perspective, this is the biggest challenge. What to do with team members, let's say 10 people, who are totally depending from another team that is working it. But let's say, yes, you plan, but you never plan everything perfectly.
Yeah.
So what to do with these people? Even sometimes you can do like a context switching. You're developing this, now go and develop something else, but the context switching from in the developer's world is not something good. Usually it's not working well. And if you do it often, it's not working. So the other challenge, apart from the how to adopt it, the other challenge is how to plan that well the value streams to have the minimum dependencies across the teams. And having said that, as they're building something big, it's like really a mastery to do some kind of planning to avoid such hard stops across teams. So to allow every team to work with a good pace, with very limited dependencies and very limited even technical depth. So these are the at least from my perspective, the two biggest challenges in this scaled agile thing.
Faizal.
I think for me, in a previous role, I was sort of the profession lead, and one of the sort of challenges I found was trying to make sure that the BAs that I would deploy into teams weren't solely consumed by their day-to-day project, and having to sort of constantly remind them through ceremonies like meetups and community of practices and things like that to look above their day-to-day project, which is easier said than done because they are in their day-to-day project context, they're in delivery mode, but I think it's around helping to ensure that the VAs don't lose sight of them being sort of a part of a bigger beast, which, like I said, it's easier said than done because they're working with an engineering team, they're working with the product owner, delivery manager, scrum master to try and best deliver a thing. But sometimes you just need to remind sort of the analysts to take that sort of step back, take that holistic approach, and just understand that they're part of a bigger puzzle. That's sort of one of the challenges I sort of face. And just to sort of echo what Gill said earlier on about making sure that the various teams are aligned through sort of singular sort of ceremonies and as well, and make sure sort of where possible planning does happen collaboratively and trying to find that right balance between feeding information down that's just detailed enough for a team, as Gill said, to have that sort of autonomy and not make it feel like they're being told from sort of higher ups to build a specific solution with a specific button in a specific location. So just having fostering sort of collaborative sessions, perhaps even co-creating artifacts, things like that. So it's that transition down from sort of a higher portfolio level to a lower level, day-to-day team level is perhaps a little easier if there's sort of behaviors and sort of a culture of sort of having a softer handing over from one point to another, rather than something that might feel a bit sort of autocratic from higher up.
It makes me think what you've been saying, the three of you, really, that there's some correlations actually between Scaled Agile and really a sort of topic I have to think about quite a lot, which is the alignment of business architecture to business analysis. Because I think in projects where it isn't particularly scaled, it isn't always very obvious where the links are between business architecture and BA, unless you start to explore like the value stream mapping that might have occurred, and the various other things that we might typically think about. But particularly thinking about the value streams, that's something that is somewhat front and center when it comes to safe delivery. So you're already starting to talk that broader language than you would do if you're very thinking at a very specific feature level. We're using as well some of the techniques that perhaps business architects use as well. They tend to operate very much thinking about how we implement the strategy through the business architecture. So it's probably quite a relatively easier leap for them to move into a safe environment as opposed to, a Scaled Agile environment, as opposed to a regular Agile or even waterfall environment, as I think about it. So what it also demonstrates is that, whilst there's different terminology and it feels like there's different structures, that we're not a million miles away from familiarity, from different levels. So I think maybe just that's a challenge to not lose sight of as a BA, that it might feel like there's loads of dependencies. It might feel like there's a massive more complexity. But actually, if you boil it down and look at some of the small parts of Scaled Agile, you'll see some very familiar approaches, techniques, and concepts, and they'll link to other concepts that are like business architecture, maybe a little bit familiar as well. So I guess just don't be too daunted by the topic is probably what I'm saying. And the more I have these conversations, the more it gives me comfort that as BAs, whether we're in a Scaled Agile environment, I'm not sure what the term is for just a regular Agile environment. I guess it is a non-scaled environment, or indeed a waterfall environment. All the things we've been talking about today are equally valid. It's just trying to get the right balance. I think, which is going back to a point Gill made earlier on. And it probably makes me think as well, but again, based on something I said a little while ago, if one team has a bit of insight and knowledge, maybe based on what they're building, whether it's relating to a dependency or otherwise, there are no physical barriers to stopping somebody in one team or one pod or whatever you might call it going and communicate with another team, and sharing what you know. So I think sometimes we might overcomplicate things ourselves, thinking these barriers exist, when absolutely nothing stops someone in one pod going to help the other and gives them a little bit of insight as to what they know as well. Good. I think one more question, if we've got a few more minutes, and that is really what I ask is really whether you've got either anything further you wish to add in relation to Scaled Agile and BA, or if there was one thing that you could change about Scaled Agile or in relation to business analysis, what it might be. So I guess you could think of that as with how would you also change business analysts in the way they work with Scaled Agile. But as that's such an easy question, I'll ask Stoyan that first, if I could, please.
I think it depends on what level of business analyst you are and what expertise and years of working experience you have. Because if you are, let's say, more junior business analysts, try to be the carved stone that fits into the team level, because you will learn more about the fundamentals of business analysis. If you have already some experience, then jump to the art or program level. It's like upstream role. And in the end, if you are experienced one, push to be included into the portfolio level, where you will first, you have to understand the big picture. You have to have some context knowledge, not only for something specific that your team is building on. Apologize. And I think this is like the hierarchy of how the business analyst fits into every every stage of this Scaled Agile environment thing, team, program, portfolio level. And that's why I said it depends. If you're like 2 or 3 years of experience directly, you're not for the portfolio level. Jump to the team. If you're really experienced one, you don't want to write user stories. You don't want to discuss every day with developers what has been done. Do you have some hard stops, things like that? You don't want to define acceptance criteria, things like that. For the experienced business analyst, jump directly to the portfolio level, understand the problem, understand the product, the outside environment, even understand the stakeholders, and be part of that. So this is how I see it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Stoyan, because it shows that anybody with any BA experience can come in at different levels, as you say, from a Scaled Agile perspective. And I think it's some good advice to try and start small if you're new to business analysis before throwing yourself into the more complicated, where you've probably got decisions and questions and information firing at you at all levels. If you're thinking of things from a portfolio perspective as opposed to a team perspective, where it's probably a little bit more contained, a little bit more manageable, and maybe a little bit less changeable for a short while anyway. Faizal, any points from you? Last points for you?
I think for me, if I could sort of change one thing, it'd be that I would love for the BA role to be sort of called out a little bit more than what it perhaps currently is in some of the framework, some of the literature. I think the BA role, obviously, we do find it sort of consumed within the umbrella of the sort of development team, and that sort of brings ambiguity and confusion to the role, especially where you might work with clients who might not necessarily understand what a BA does. The skill sets are so broad, which is one of our strengths as BAs, but having such a broad skill set can also lead to confusion for people who might not be as familiar with the true value sort of a business analyst can bring. And you might find that because of that, you might almost get sort of relegated to a sort of a user story factory where BAs can do much more than just churn out user stories. So if I could wave a magic wand, it would be that the role is perhaps sort of called out a little bit more in the literature.
Definitely be supportive of that, Faizal. Definitely. Makes me think when Agile, I was first introduced to that, I was told, BAs don't be involved in Agile projects. And so my experience has been quite the opposite, because developers do some excellent work on development, and architects do some excellent work in that space, and testers in their space as well. If we ask them to dilute the excellence they're doing in those areas to become BAs, then it's not going to have a great impact. And of course, BAs have impact in many ways, different, as we've all discussed. Gill.
So if I could change one thing, and this is kind of a long-term goal, so we're quite new to it, but in my aspiration, I'd like to get to a point where we're in continuous flow of work. It feels like our quarterly cycles, they have great benefits, particularly upwards through the organization, for visibility of what's working, how things are progressing, which items are progressing, and also the structure around the sort of marketplace and dependency mapping and those sorts of things around the really well coordinated planning. They all have huge benefits. But in terms of analysis to build up the backlog ready for the quarterly planning cycle, and then in the teams to get to the end of a quarterly cycle to be ready for the next thing. I find the sort of the false timelines can be unhelpful when you're looking at work that doesn't neatly fit into a quarter. So I think while that there are ways to get those benefits and to kind of spread them out, but have the same level of governance and the same level of structure. But a world where continuous flow exists rather than peaks and troughs, and then a few weeks of intensive conversations to get things ready in time, that feels like a better place to be. But we're so early on in our experience that we need to really test out quarterly planning, get all the good parts of it working really well to understand if that is somewhere that we can get to. I feel like it's not helpful to put deadlines on things that don't need it, particularly if it's not the delivery deadline. But that's just part of the cycle, which I kind of dread at the moment. But just from a calendar perspective, purely, just.
That's it. I could totally relate to the point you said, and everything the three of you have said over the last hour. So thank you very much. It probably feels like a good point to stop as well. But yeah, really enjoyed the conversation on Scaled Agile, and definitely learned a bit through the process as well. Yes, all it remains is just to say thank you to the three of you. Look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.